We're recording the interview of James Jim Hoover. This interview is being conducted by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn, 2800 Presidential Drive in Dayton, Ohio. It is 4:22 p.m. on June 7th, 2019. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Ericka. How are you?
I am doing fine. How are you today?
It's a great day. I'm at a reunion here at the Holiday Inn and talking to a few people I served with and a bunch of guys that I didn't serve with. Different times they were there.
Okay, fantastic. I'm very excited that you're here.
Thank you.
Okay. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Los Angeles, California, February 20th, 1946.
The Sunshine State.
That's right.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupation?
My father was a bus driver. He was James Henry Hoover. He served in the United States Navy before World War II, during and through Korea. My mother was a secretary, very smart woman. That's where I got my brains. No, that's what my dad said. And she was secretary to a lot of people in Chicago, and then she moved to Los Angeles where she met my father.
Okay. Did you say what branch your dad was in?
United States Navy.
Okay.
He told me he won World War II single-handedly. So.
Well, we thank him for that. Absolutely. Somebody had to do it.
That's right.
All right. Go. What rank was he?
He wound up being an E6, and he was a quartermaster, a ship's navigator, and he was on the second part of World War II. He was on a sub-chaser out in the Atlantic, and they used to chase U-boats away from Cape Hatteras, believe it or not. But interestingly, if I may elaborate,
Please.
he was on a ship called the Richmond at the early part of before World War II started. The Richmond was stationed in Hawaii, in Pearl Harbor, and it received orders to sail out on a goodwill tour to Valparaiso, Chile. And the boat went out of Pearl Harbor just before it was bombed. My dad, being the quartermaster, was at the bridge with the captain when a flash message came in and said, and the radio man told the captain, he said, "Sir, we have a flash message." Flash is the second highest level of messages other than flash override, which goes to the president directly. And that flash message was all about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They were somewhere near Panama at the time, and my dad is standing there looking at his charts, which for the Navy is like a map, and he's going. And when they said the Arizona was sunk, he was very, very sad because his best friend had been transferred there. Years later, in 2007, my dad and I and my wife and some other friends went to Hawaii for a cruise ship and ride around the islands. It was a great, great vacation for my dad. And my dad said, "When are we going to go see the Arizona?" And I said, "Dad, we'll do it the last day." So we did it the last day. I bought tickets for him, and he got on board that skiff. By that time, he was 86 years old, and he had trouble walking. But the Arizona crosses this landing area, and we got off the skiff, and he almost ran, hobbling back to that wall where all the names were. And he said, "That's him. That's him. That's Jenkins." And he started taking pictures of this name on the wall. And I said, "Dad, who's Jenkins?" He said, "Well, that was my best friend, and he was killed on the Arizona, and he's down there today. Very moving moment for me.
I understand. I understand. So it would seem like your dad told you a lot about his military career.
Yes, but that was kind of pretty much hidden about Jenkins.
Okay.
He wanted to say goodbye in his own time, in his own way. So.
Is that the reason why you joined the military?
No, I watched a lot of John Wayne movies, that's all. My uncle had been in the Air Force, though, and I liked his uniform. He gave me the old Eisenhower jacket, and I wore that in high school or junior high or whatever it was. And that kind of made me lean toward the Air Force.
Okay. So you, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No. Okay, so you lived out in SoCal. Did you have any other siblings?
No, I was an only child. My mother had toxemia and couldn't have more children.
I'm so sorry to hear that. You didn't have to share anything.
No, I got the complete inheritance, so I'm using it to fund college education for my grandchildren.
All right, yeah, that's nice. Okay, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I was actually a school teacher for about 2 years in Long Beach and Bellflower. You may know those areas.
I do.
It's amazing. So I was a substitute teacher, and I had been a teacher aide, and I was working toward my credential. And then because the Vietnam War, everybody was getting drafted, I decided I'm going to make my own destiny, and I joined the Air Force. Because as I mentioned, my uncle had been in the Air Force. And there was a program called Air Power with Douglas Cronkite. And it was about the history of air power and how it developed. I was interested in the astronauts. I had gone to an air show and seen Chuck Yeager there. He was the famous test pilot. And then later in my career I met him, but I'm getting ahead of you again.
Okay, so after high school, what year did you graduate?
1964.
Okay, so after high school you went to college?
Yes, at California State University at Long Beach.
Okay.
Made it there in 4 years plus a summer session. Made it through, majored in geography. I had a double major of education, and I was a minor in speech.
So, when you were in high school, that you set out to be a teacher, you wanted to teach?
I always wanted to be a teacher, right.
Why? What was your passion?
I had good teachers. They seemed to care about me, and they instilled in me a yearning for learning, which, because of computers and things like this silly little thing that I carry with me everywhere, I can look up anything I want, and I satisfy the hunger of my mind.
Okay. That's fantastic. It's not so often that young people know what they want to do at such an early age. So you set out, you went for it, you got it, but here comes Vietnam, and then you heard about air power, and you said, no, I want my own destiny, and you said the Air Force is for me because I'm spiffy and blue. Right?
That's absolutely true.
Matches my eyes. I'm going for
and
it.
My shirt and my jacket and my presidential unit citation.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No. We're great. We're great. You joined the Air Force. When you joined the Air Force, what job did you have in mind?
Well,
I'm sure teacher wasn't on the list.
No, but I'm kind of a natural teacher anyway. I teach in my church. I teach Bible in my church to this day. But I wasn't sure exactly. I knew that I didn't have the eyes to be a pilot. So I went on and did military police, security police. They put me in that. that was their greatest need at the time, and I said, okay, that's fine. I scored very high on the electrical and the mechanical, but I thought it might be fun to be a cop and maybe get into counter spy or something like that.
So it sounds like you were enlisted.
I was an enlisted man, yes, for 4 years.
Why? You had a degree.
Well, I did have a degree, but I think when I took the test, the only thing they were looking for were pilots and navigators, and they didn't have any openings for line officers. But I kept it in the back of my mind that they could do that. I was officer qualified. I took the officer quality test, but my eyes failed I didn't meet the qualifications to be a pilot. I couldn't line up things.
Okay. So you're enlisted. You're off to basic. What year is it?
That was May 12th, 1969 to be exact. Went through basic training, kind of liked it. I was made the house mouse, which was second in command of the barracks between well, there was a dorm chief, and then there was the house mouse. So that's what they called us. And you're laughing. But
I've never heard that before.
Oh, well.
So there's the dorm chief, and then the next in command is the house mouse?
The house mouse was the assistant.
Okay.
And we had a room to ourselves, and everybody else was in an open bay barracks. And what it was is we had a great big tall guy that played college basketball, and he was our dorm chief. And the house mouse backs him up by making sure that we march to our schedules, our scheduled classes, and PT and marching. And somehow I got through basic. I got a lot of sleep there by comparison to my previous life. It was mandatory you were in bed 8 hours. So we made it through, and we got the flight. And actually, if I may, my teaching skills came in handy because we had some folks that were having difficulty, and the drill instructor or training instructor, TI, said, "Hoover, you were a teacher, right?" "Yes, sir." And he said, "I got to get these guys through. They're having trouble with their tests." So I held class every evening from 7 to 8, and we just learned by rote. For instance, we had to know certain articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and Article 112 is drunk on duty. So what I found was, if I worked with them and said that, okay, wild turkey is 112 proof. How many have ever had wild turkey? Well, they all drank. And so I said, okay, that's 112 proof. How much proof is it? They'd say 112 proof. And then I say, okay, that's Article 112, drunk on duty. So I made it fun, kind of fun, and everybody passed. Everybody passed in our squad, and boy, that TI was so happy with me. Then I never saw him again.
Were you one of the oldest people there?
Yeah, I was 23.
Okay.
And they were mostly 18-year-olds.
Did they call you Gramps?
No.
Oh. In my squad, they called them Gramps.
We were required to call each other Airman Hoover, Airman whatever, and we had to address, that was part of our training. So we didn't get nicknames.
Okay. Anything else that you remember about basic?
I graduated.
Okay. And that was at Lackland.
Lackland Air Force Base, yes, ma'am.
And then tech school, you marched right across campus?
No,
No.
I didn't, believe it or not.
Okay.
I did not go to security police training school. I went Wright to Vandenberg Air Force Base. I was called OJT. People with a college degree didn't have to do that because they thought you could learn on the job, OJT, on the job training.
Okay.
So I was one of the few. There were like
Congrats.
3 of us that were there that did that.
Was that easy, hard, or in between?
It was pretty easy stuff.
College man.
If you can get through college textbooks, you can get through that. But and I used to help other people with their OJT. It was partly written and partly hands-on.
I've talked to a few other police officers. So you ranked by like 3, so it was 3, then 5, then 7?
Okay, yes, there were levels. When you ask me questions, I partly read lips.
Oh.
So if you put your hand in front of your face, I'm sorry, I can't always hear well. I apologize.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I won't do it again.
It's all right. Yeah, there was a 3-level, which I achieved there, taking the tests and putting the rifles together and learning to direct traffic and things like that. And then there's the 5-level, and then the 7-level, which is supervisory, and then there's a 9-level which is the superintendent training. So I finally got my 5-level and journeyman, did quite well. Went through it pretty fast. So.
What happens after that?
Well, I was at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which was a missile base. Now, a lot of the guys the Air Force is all about airplanes, but that was where they sent me. And so we'd go out on the missile slicks, and we'd climb up these towers. And it was cold because we were right near the ocean. And you bundled, no matter how much you bundled up, you were cold. And we were up there, and it was called a gantry. And it's the superstructure around a missile. And we did that, and I was in Space Systems Command. So some of the satellites that were sent up, we were guarding those. And then what happened was they found out I could type. They said, "You go to college?" And I said, "Oh yeah, yes sir." I didn't go around wearing it on my sleeve, but it's in my record. So the gentleman says, "You can type. So we need somebody to type." And I thought, I remember my dad said, "Don't volunteer for anything," because they'd say, "Anybody here know how to type?" And then you were cleaning toilets. But that was the old-time Air Force. But yes, sir. Yeah, I couldn't lie. I have trouble with not wanting to lie, so I said I can type. And they had me go in there and typing performance reports and medals, and I did a safety letter once a week, and I was working 8 to 5 with weekends off. What a deal! And I didn't have to climb up in the gantries and freeze my nose off, and so that's what I did. So then I got an assignment to Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, which is the reason we're here this weekend at this reunion. And they sent me over there. I had gotten married to an Air Force First Lieutenant nurse at that time. Lovely lady. Poor lady's been married to me for 49 years now. So she's going to get a Patience Award. But next year in January, we're going to celebrate 50 years together.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Wonderful person, wonderful person. So, but I give her way. That's what makes her wonderful.
Any smart husband does.
Yeah, that's right. So I was married 3.5.
There's that degree.
Yeah, I figured it out. 3.5 months we were married, and I was off to Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. And that was not Vietnam, but it was pretty much, there's a lot of war stuff going on.
Tell me about it.
Well, I did the same thing. I worked flight for the first couple months, maybe 3 months, and then they found out I could type, so they put me in charge of the day shift at the prison, at the jail, I'll call it.
They had a jail?
They had a small jail, which also had a dual function for correctional custody, which is correctional custody is part of the UCMJ punishment. So I was day shift, and when we get a new prisoner in, I type. Now, you were Army? Were you in the Army?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Air Force prisoners, they came in and they just thought it was a country club. But when we get Army prisoners come in, they had been in Long Binh jail, which was another story you should read about, in Vietnam, where they were beaten with billy clubs by the military police. Well, we didn't do that in the Air Force.
Of course not.
You know.
It's a country club.
Yeah. Well, kind of. But it was a very disciplined jail. And then they loved me. The Army prisoners loved me because, okay, guys, we're going to march down to the dining hall and we're going to check our mail. Well, that's better than getting beat in the head with a billy club. You know, I really didn't want to do any of that kind of. It wasn't in my makeup to harm people in that way.
It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it just wasn't my style. And I said, look, you guys work with me. We'll have a good time here. We're going to have to clean the place. Oh, we cleaned it. That place you could eat off the floor.
Army is good at that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of training.
Eating off the floor?
No, cleaning.
Oh, cleaning. Okay.
Yes, cleaning.
I was going to. I'm glad you clarified that. But and then once in a while we get sea rations. I'm glad I'm making your day, Ericka. But we'd eat sea rations and have because we couldn't get a ride down to the dining hall and they didn't want to march, so I could have sea rations down there. I ate sea rations about once a day when I was there. My father said he ate K rations. So, let's see. Then I was also, when we had no prisoners, I'd work law enforcement. And they put me in charge of the officer hooch area. May I tell you a quick story?
Please.
We had one general officer on base. His name was General Butcher. And my job when I was on law enforcement was a walking patrol around the officer area. Now, us enlisted swine, we lived in hooches that were cold in winter and hot in the summer and full of bugs. But the officers, because they flew night flights mainly, night missions, had air-conditioned trailers. And yeah, so I guarded those because there was a lot of theft going on in the area by the local ties. And so I got the houseboys and housegirls to notify me if somebody was there that wasn't supposed to be there. A little bit of 7-level planning there. And one day, one of the jobs was to watch the general's double wide trailer. He had a really nice one. And I had never met the general, and I'd stay, maybe sit in the bushes, because I didn't want to be too overt in my presence. And I was behind the bushes, and I saw and he was an American, but he had a funny flight suit on. And of course, I was carrying a 6-gun, a Smith & Wesson 38, and I had a badge. I'm wondering, what's this guy doing? He's walking around the general's trailer. So I went up there, I'm doing my job, and I said, halt. And he turned around, and I couldn't see his rank. The rank was on the collar, but he was wearing a flight suit, and it was up here, and I wasn't in a position to see his rank. And I thought he might have been one of our Americans breaking into the general's trailer. It looked like he was snooping around. And I said, who goes there? He says, I'm General Butcher. Well, I didn't just buy it. I said, come over here, please. Well, I'm carrying a 6-gun. He's not going to argue with me, right? Comes over, sure enough, there's a star on each shoulder. I thought, well, Hoover, you're through. Leavenworth Prison sounds pretty good. And he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Airman Hoover. security police, and I'm here to protect your trailers, the officers here, from theft and anything else. He says, why did you talk to me that way? I said, sir, I didn't know who you were. And I apologize, but I thought I was doing my job. And he comes up to me, he puts his hand on my shoulder very slowly, and he says, thank you, Hoover, for protecting me. You're doing a good job at what your job is. Well, I was so relieved. I mean, oh. And he actually sat down on the grass. He says, I need somebody to talk to. Well, what am I going to do? Tell the one star I don't want to talk to him? And I was really supposed to be moving around, but we sat down, we talked for about 20 minutes about construction. And he said he always wanted to be in construction work. So had a kind of a good time talking to the general, and I'd see him now and then. And I'd still be in the bushes, and I'd say, I got your back, General, I got your back. Yeah, anyway, that's my little war story. And it was kind of interesting. I was really worried when I stopped him, but I was really trying to help whoever was in the general's position there. And the guy, he was looking around like he was trying to get in someplace. Anyway, then I went on and they pulled me out of that job and put me in the orderly room because I could type. I was a very fast typist, about 70 to 75 words a minute, so I typed up OERs, or not OERs, the Airman Performance Reports. Our NCOs, they were good, hardcore guys, but a lot of them were not good at English. I had to correct a lot of spelling. I had taken a lot of English courses in high school and college. And I polished them up, and people actually got promoted from those. So then I went back to Vandenberg Air Force Base. After that one, I guess I will tell you, I was involved in the Sante raid. Are you familiar with that?
I'm a little, but our viewers are not.
Okay. Good answer. The Sante raid was when President Nixon found out that there were some prisoners. He was briefed that there were some prisoners near Hanoi and Sante. It was 19 miles southwest of Hanoi, and that had been spotted by some recon aircraft, I believe. And they trained a bunch of people to help those prisoners escape. They had a plan, and they trained at Hurlburt Field in northern Florida. That's where Special Operations is today, and they were Green Berets, Special Ops guys. Air Force was an integrated unit. We even had some Navy people in there. They had a plan on how they would go in there. What it was is, I was at the base. I never left the base, but I was on standby on a helicopter to go rescue the Green Berets that they got in a firefight. And so there was a C-130 that went first, and then there were 6 helicopters, 3 on each side. And they were like a V, like you see geese flying, and the C-130 broke the wind so that there was better, I'll say, gas mileage for the helicopters. And there was one refueling en route over there and one refueling when they came back, mid-air refueling. But the C-130 went in and hovered, and the 3 helicopters triangulated the base. There were 3 roads going in there. And they triangulated the base, and they were facing out, trying to keep the North Vietnamese army there. There were 19,000 people in that army, and there were only 60 Green Berets plus the air crews. And then they crash landed one helicopter inside the compound and went out, opened the gate, the main gate, and let the guys from 2 helicopters rush in there, while the other 3 helicopters triangulated the base, and they found no prisoners. The Viet Cong, by routine, would move their prisoners from time to time. So from the time we found out there were prisoners there and had absolute evidence, they had moved the prisoners. So our guys got back in. They shot up a few guards, prison guards who were there lingering. And they got back on 5 helicopters, because one had crash landed, and they threw a big bunch of grenades into that one helicopter. And they went out without the prisoners. But from what I understand from meeting with POWs when I was stationed at South Shaw Air Force Base, that they got the word that there was a rescue mission and that America cared and their fellow military cared. And that was very, very important to them. It gave them a hope that they didn't have. And they had been tortured pretty badly. I don't want to go into that. It's not good for me to do that.
Okay.
So then I transferred back to the United States. I was at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I was tired of being a policeman and carrying my M16 and my M60 machine gun and my M79 grenade launcher and hand grenades and all the rest that went on with it. So I retrained. Since I could type so well, I went into administration, and I was put in the base commander's office at Vandenberg Air Force Base, because I had a long time to be at Vandenberg, because I had just come back from overseas, and I could type really good, and so I did type. And I met people quite well, and base commander liked me. And Chief Master Sergeant Kissling was the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. And he came to Vandenberg Air Force Base, and he met me, and he liked me, and he arranged for me to go to officer training school. So I did. Stupid to go through basic training twice, isn't it? You know?
It's a little questionable.
What was in my mind? But you know what? I came out as second lieutenant, and I loved the military by that time.
And you got more pay.
Oh, I got more pay, and my retirement pay is pretty good. I retired as a captain. I made E5 as a staff sergeant in the Air Force. It's not staff in the Army, but it's would have been just 3-stripe sergeant for you. And I did all right. I had commendation medal from that, and that's this one.
You sitting over there kind of heavy. I mean, do you have to work that shoulder out sometimes? Just little.
I love it. I love it.
Keep up with this side.
I love the way you do that, Ericka. That's all right. Yes, I did a lot of things, got a lot of medals for them. So then I took the commission, and they shifted me. Am I doing okay, or do you want to ask me questions?
No, please.
Keep
going.
They after officer training school, I was sent to Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, and I got there, and I was supposed to work, you know, at the base level, and they had a need. I guess there was a problem. They had a real need for somebody at the 9th Air Force headquarters, and I was an admin officer, so I went up there, and I became a branch chief as a second lieutenant, which was pretty high for a headquarters. And I was in charge of the deficiency management branch of the IG. And so when the inspector general would send troops out inspectors out in the field, then they would bring their reports back, and I would distribute the reports far and wide. Everything's computer now, but it was paper then. They came back with stacks this high. And then I would do analysis of the trends, and we were inspecting the Guard and the reserves. And this is when the total force was just having a birth time. It was just beginning. They wanted the Guard and Reserve to be part of the total force. And of course, nowadays they're called up a lot, but they weren't called up much then. And so I did deficiency analysis, and I'd find trends, and I'd report it up there. And I was actually called up one time and met a 1-star general named Ryan, and he thanked me for a good job. because we found out the deficiencies in the Guard ran, you know, the areas where they needed the help the most, they were all down a little bit, you know, not all, but most. And then the areas where they were strong, so they started working together on their deficiencies, and we also did follow-up until they got all the deficiencies corrected. So I did that for 4 years. I made captain, and I was ready to move on. 4 years was enough for me, and but they were a great bunch of guys, and very professional. They were the best of the best because they were inspectors. So, and then I moved. I got my first command. I went to RAF Mildenhall. You don't want to hear that?
No, I do. I had a quick question. Where was the wife? Was she still in? Was she following you around? Were they putting
My
you
wife
guys
followed me everywhere except for officer training school.
Were they stationing you guys together? Because she was a new...
She got out after 2 years.
Okay.
So when I was at Vandenberg, she got out. She was a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She was more interested in nursing than being a military officer. Politics kind of rubbed her the wrong way. There were some really great officers she worked with, but some of them, you know, I mean, she wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to be a bedside nurse, take care of people.
Okay, and you can do that anywhere.
Anywhere. That was exactly the point.
Okay, all right.
She wanted to do that, and then more than that, she wanted to have children. So we had 3 boys. 2 are police officers, and one is he runs a vending machine business, and he's happy as a lark with it. He's his own boss, so he's that type. So, but they're in their 40s now. So.
Okay, so you.
Mildenhall.
Yes.
Mildenhall. I went to RAF Mildenhall, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Were you a sergeant? Did you just private?
No.
No? Lieutenant?
E4.
E4, okay. E4, specialist. So I had one specialist work for me. All the rest were master sergeants, E7s, and it was a courier outfit, Armed Forces Courier Station, and we carried top secret material all over the world. We had blanket orders. Every 3 months we'd reissue the order, and we didn't, most orders, written orders, tell you to go from point A to point B. I could go anywhere in the world with blanket orders. I flew on civilian aircraft carrying top secret material. We carried, we took PSYOP Easy to the Navy. PSYOP Easy is Single Integrated Operational Plan. ESI Easy is extremely sensitive information. It was the nuclear targeting data for the submarines. It was also for land-based missiles, but we didn't have any in England, RAF Mildenhall. Land-based missiles, at least not intercontinental. And I actually carried several presidential level messages. President Carter at the time wanted to get a message to Prime Minister Callahan, who was Prime Minister before Lady Thatcher. And I got that through the U.S. Embassy. And there was some pretty high level stuff. I actually got to get on a civilian airplane on December 6th. 1979, and I flew from London Heathrow Airport with a stop in Seattle down to San Francisco. I have to be careful what I say here.
Okay.
But San Francisco, where I was met by another courier, we had a special ID card in addition to our military ID card, so we showed each other our cards. I wouldn't turn it over to him.
You just weren't passing coins? There wasn't no attaboys?
Yeah, no. Just showed an ID so I knew who he was, and I gave this material to him, and on December 7th, President Carter was, I'm not being political here, he was our president. I'm talking about Commander-in-Chief here, okay? But he was briefed on that. And then on December 25th, the Russians had attacked on Afghanistan. And what I had been carrying was proof positive that they had moved many, many Soviet divisions from the Eastern Bloc countries to Afghanistan border. So we knew it was coming. We knew it was coming. And I guess that was probably the most important day of my life, other than my wedding day. But
of course.
Yeah, in case my wife sees this. But it was a pretty heavy-duty day. Pretty important to get that message. It went actually right to the president the next day. That's my one claim to fame. So then I moved on from Mildenhall. I had a lot of missions, but I probably shouldn't go on to that. That's the one I'll tell because of the classified nature. And I moved to Edwards Air Force Base. I worked at the Rocket Propulsion Laboratory for a year. And I was Squadron Section Commander. That was my second command. And I had to discharge a few people. In those days, drugs and, probably saying the wrong thing here, but homosexuality was against regulations. And so when someone would admit that, I would have to discharge them. Administratively, it wasn't a bad conduct discharge or no court-martial or anything like that. It was paperwork. And I took care of the troops.
Did you find that people were saying that just to get out of the military? Was it always true?
No, I didn't find that.
Okay.
It was only 2 guys that admitted to that.
Okay.
And
they just wanted to live their best life. Okay.
It didn't. They were afraid they'd get caught.
Okay.
And I think that they said, I better admit this. And they had probably spoken to the Area Defense Council attorney ahead of time, because they didn't admit much. They just said, I feel I'm a homosexual, and and at that time that would get you out of the service.
Okay.
Administratively, again, and it wasn't punitive. So, and in my career, I sat on about 20 discharge boards and court-martials. And you're kind of like a judge, and you have to be judgmental there, but you also got to call them when you see them and keep the bad guys out of the service. So anyway, let's see, I served at Edwards Air Force Base, then I moved to the main base.
What year was it?
1980,
okay.
And I was actually at Edwards 6 years. I had a year at the Rocket Propulsion Laboratory where they did all the brains were there. They all had doctor's degrees. Some of the enlisted guys had master's degrees, and then they would actually go through a special training and get commissioned, and if they worked out as junior engineers and junior chemists. And I worked on that program because the Russians had like 6 times the engineers we did. So were trying to play catch up. Then I moved down to main base as Squadron Section Commander. One of my NCOs was Julia Berry. She was probably the most polished professional person I had ever met in any career, in or out of the Air Force. Julia ran the PME, the Professional Military Education. I mean, she never had a wrinkle in her uniform. And she was bright, and she made professional NCOs out of sad sacks. She was very good. And then she left. She and her husband were both master sergeants. They went to Hill Air Force Base. It's a little sad. Hope I don't tear up. But they were going to work one morning together, and they were merging onto a freeway, and there was a dense fog, and they got T-boned, and they were both killed instantly. And everybody at Edwards Air Force, she hadn't been gone very long, everybody at Edwards Air Force Base, and especially in my command, I mean, we were in a funk, F-U-N-K. And just so sad. The whole base, nobody got any work done that day. Because she had affected every NCO on the base.
It's like a national base memorial day.
It was. And then we had a general who had said something about changing the names of our barracks, giving names to the barracks. So I went to the general. Now here I am, a lowly captain. And I said, General, I don't know how to do it. I have no idea where to start. But I need your support. I want to name at that time, women had their own dormitory, barracks. I said, I want to name number 10, which was our barracks. I want to name that Barry Hall. And he knew her. And he said, Captain Hoover, that's the best idea I've heard all day. So he supported me. I had to go to it was a paperwork nightmare. You had to get letters from the parents, and you had a permission to do this. Then you had to put that into a package, and it had to go outside the Air Force and inside the Air Force, dual channel. Outside the Air Force went to the Department of Heraldry, believe it or not, in DC. I had never heard of it before. They approved it. The Air Force approved it because two-star general backing it up. And we had the most wonderful dedication. I think there were probably 5,000 people at Edwards Air Force Base, and probably 3,500 were there. General Chuck Yeager was there. He was the test pilot that broke the barrier. Of course, our two-star was there.
So the only people that weren't there were people that couldn't get off duty?
Basically, or the new people who didn't know her.
And shame on them.
Yeah. But you're right. But they all went there, and we had collected money, private funds, okay, just out of your pocket. And we had gotten a bronze plaque with her face on it in uniform. And of course, her uniform was pristine. And we had her parents there, and brothers and sisters and what have you. All her relatives were there. And we gave them free billeting at the transit quarters, which was pretty nice.
I'm sure, you're Air Force.
Of course. Yeah, we had the best food and the best golf courses.
All right, you're just bragging now.
Yeah, we did. I don't golf, but I understand they were pretty good. But it was a very moving time. I've had a lot of moving times in the service. So anyway, I finished that command, then I retrained into contracting. That was the time when President Reagan had difficulty with the military paying $300 for a hammer and $7,000 for a coffee pot. And I went to the colonel in charge and I said, you know, there's no jobs on the outside for squadron commanders, but there's jobs for contracting people. We wrote the contract. No, we weren't contractors. So I learned the DARs and the FARs, and that prepared me for my civilian career. I went to a lot of schools, and then I was moved to East Hartford, Connecticut, where Pratt & Whitney Engine Company was. And we had a lot of, I wound up being in charge of buying all the engines as a captain. It's usually the equivalent of a GS-13 and a GS-14, but one of them had been transferred, so I was in charge of that for a while. So I had $17 billion of aircraft engines under my signatory, which was pretty good for a captain. I can't even count up to $1 billion, so Ericka. But one of my additional duties, and again, having been a commander, this helped me, was to become, in Connecticut, we were the only Air Force outfit. So our job was casualty notification. And it's very difficult to go and tell a mother that her son has met his maker. And I'd always go there in my best uniform, Class A's, with another officer, of course, and I would stuff my inside pockets with Kleenex. And sometimes it was mothers. One was a mother who had a daughter only, and that was the end of the line. Her husband had died. Now her son. That was the toughest one, I think. And then there was this other family. They were Asian, and they have a different way of mourning, these people. They were actually from Asia. Their son had been killed on a motorcycle accident, but I think he was born in the United States. He was American as you and I, Ericka.
Mm-hmm.
And they just sat there, and we read him the letter, and we read them the letter, which was a thank you, was from a 3-star general in charge of personnel at Randolph Air Force Base, Texas. And there were just a bunch of them, and none of them were easy. But I'll have to say this, you saw me shed a tear now. When I was notifying people, I was steel. I was an iron wall. And we told them, after we read them the letter and the initial shock was over, and some of them even blamed me. I mean, I'm in Connecticut, you know, and they'd be killed overseas or something, but you just take it. You just kind of take the beating. And you wait for your opening when they've settled down a little bit, and then you explain that a personnel officer will be coming to visit them in the next day or so. And that they'd be getting money. They didn't seem to care about the money. Not one anybody said, "Oh boy, my son is dead, I get money." You didn't get that. But they were very, very much in shock, as you can imagine. Then the one thing I learned early on is you would tell them where they were all men that died. Didn't have any women, but that would have been even more difficult, I think. But you'd use, I'd say, your son's remains will be brought by an escort officer or non-commissioned officer. And I learned that the word remains is not a good word. So we'd always just, and this was probably unprofessional, but if his name was Bobby, I'd call him Bobby. Let's say I don't remember the name, but I'd say, we're going to bring Bobby to the, Bobby will be brought to you, properly attired in his military uniform, and he will come escorted, and there will be a flag that will eventually become yours. And I gave them a very top-level briefing, not the detail the personnelist would give them, but top level of what some of the things that would come their way. But they were still kind of like numb. I think numb is the right word, but that was difficult. And then I retired and I went into contracting and didn't have to notify anybody about death of a kid. Worked as a civilian 14 years in 5 different aerospace corporations. Oh, am I dirty? But anyway, I did that, and then I had heart trouble, so I had to retire at age 56 from aerospace. And they figured, the VA figured out that I was in Nakan Phenom, which this reunion's all about, and that they had dropped Agent Orange on it. And they said, oh, you've got ischemic heart disease, you have a pacemaker defibrillator. It's presumed that you got that while there, because it happened to so many. And I went to a lot of funerals of a lot of guys who had pancreatic cancer. So I can't complain that I'm 21 years still alive after they discovered my heart problem. So, and that's about it on my career. I don't know. I retired. I have 3 grandchildren. I use that VA money to help them get their education. Got 10 grandchildren. They're all going to college or want to go to college, and I want that for them. I want the best for them, or some kind of trade school. So I help them that way, and I pay for a vacation once a year. We usually vacation at a lake and rent a house, and I'm very happy to have been married to Emily for 49 years.
Okay.
I'm done, I think, before you kick me out of here.
Well, I have a few more questions.
Please.
Okay. What are some life lessons you've learned from your military service?
For my military career?
Yeah. Your long military career.
It certainly made a man of me, a man of decision. I learned how to make decisions. If I have a fault, it's that I plan ahead, and it's not a fault. So planning is the first, plan, organize, coordinate, all that. We all learned that in our education. So I learned that. I learned how to work with people. May I speak frankly?
Please.
I was in the service in a time that you may not understand. But there was, in 1968, before I went in the service, there were a lot of race riots. Okay? There was big problems. Los Angeles, I was from Los Angeles. People were fighting in the streets, and it's ridiculous. And hey, folks, let's try to get along. And I learned to get along with everybody in the service. And I don't care what your religion is, so to speak. That's the phrase we used about race differences. Hey, we're all here to do a job. And I really think that the military, who sat us down in rooms, they called it race relations at the time. Now it's human relations, I think. But I think that was a good thing, a great breakthrough. And I think it was General Jack D. Ryan who instituted that. Three-fingered Jack. He had lost a finger in World War II, and he had 3 fingers, and he'd salute with 3 fingers, 2 fingers and a thumb, and he'd salute. So he'd salute with his left hand, which had fingers, and he wouldn't salute with this. But he wanted us to work together and put the mission first. And I've seen so much improvement in my life in this area. And it meant a lot to me to be a part of a change in social attitude in the United States, my country. I learned that in the service, getting along with people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or that should be added to this interview?
I dealt a lot with classified information, and although I understand that after 33 years it's automatically declassified, I'm not sure. So I can't go to certain areas. I can't mention bases. I can't mention people and specific times. But I will say this. The intel agencies, which were 28 when I was in, and I think there are 14 or 15 of them under the new Homeland Security, they're all over the world. There are military bases that you wouldn't recognize except for the buildings. There are military people who have worked on the spy network, and they have long hair and beards and Fu Manchu mustaches, and they they're still in the service. And if you go to one of those bases and you ask them, well, where do you work? You always hear, I work at the post office. 5,000 people at one base, and they all work in the post office, Ericka. What do you think? I think we're very well protected in this nation by those people. And I don't think the spy people, intel, whatever you want to call them, are given much credit, because you can't. You don't want to identify them. So anyway, there we are.
Is the post office hiring?
If you can pass the test, and if you can get 10 extra points because you were in the service.
Oh, well, I need to check for those post office jobs.
That's right.
Once I get my degree.
There you go.
Okay.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear or view this interview?
I've been a Sunday school teacher since 1972. And I am a Christian. And there's a driving force through the entire Bible that we should love one another. Do the best you can to love everybody.
I have truly enjoyed this interview. I really hope that you have.
It was fun to talk.
That concludes our interview with James Hoover. Thank you for your time today and for your military service.